Welcome to Prize Fighters, Circus Freaks, and Gangsters. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Greta.
And we are talking about all things that are amazing in the 19th century. Today, we are finishing up the amazing first season of the Max TV show Warrior. And it has been amazing.
Yeah, even from the thumbnail, you can see Asam's going to do something cool. I can't wait till I get to see what he does that's going to be so cool.
Yeah, and then the title, if you're going to bow low, it's like, Asam does not seem like a man who is to bow.
No. There is definitely a lot of pride and kind of even a pride off going on between several different characters in this episode. It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it really, really was fantastic. Especially, I will say, when I actually started watching the correct episode as opposed to the 10th episode of season 2, where I was quite confused.
So let's see, where do we open? We open not in the rich side of town.
No.
Not in the middle class part of town.
No. But with the chillest alarm clock I think that humanity has ever devised.
That's true.
Really. And also, what amazing retirement job. I mean, there is really no one job for a retired guy who's working on the railroad, and it is apparently human alarm clocks. This guy goes around with this.
Yes.
He's got like a cane that has a tin can in it that seems to be filled with like rocks or something. So he just like steps forward and taps it on the ground, like shook, and shakes it and goes 5 o'clock. And then steps forward, shook, 5 o'clock. A really chill way to wake up. But when you're doing nothing but going to the railroad and working 12 hours and then laying down in a bed that somebody is getting out of to go work 12 hours, I think...
Oh, the hottest of hot bunking.
Oh my God. I didn't even know such a thing was possible. But I can't complain about anything that ever happens in my life again because I am not living that life of a Chinese immigrant working on the railroad. Good Lord, in the 19th century is something else.
In fact, when I was first watching it and trying to figure out, okay, what's going down, what's going on, I thought for a minute we were flashing back to being on the boat. The quarters were so tight. And so I thought, are these the circumstances he came over on the boat? I'm like, no, they probably would have been sleeping more on the floor. But like, that's how tight the quarters are.
Yeah, they're in like an underground longhouse that has 3 bunks stacked high. Although I will say that they still had more room in there than in a Chinese dorm room in 1998. For like when I was in school in Beijing, like I was in a teacher's dorm. So we had 2 to a small room. Like it would have been, it's about the size of an American bedroom, and we had 2 people in it, and we had a fan, and we had our own bathroom. Then in a room that was maybe half the size of the room that I shared with one person, they had 6 people to a bedroom. And in the bunks were 3 high on their side, and then they had just enough room between to sit a hot pot.
Yeah.
And so you'd have 6 people in this hot room with no air conditioning, clustered around a hot pot with all their laundry drying on the inside of it. And so like I understood where this like living situation came from, as I've seen it. Like they can live close to each other. They're accustomed to living much closer to each other in China than we are here. Their personal space is...
There's definitely a mental discipline to it.
Whew, yeah, well, I think it's just being accustomed to having people so close to you all times. I think that the personal space area is 6 inches in China as opposed to 18 inches in the United States.
Okay, I buy that for sure.
Yeah, it's very, very close.
But then it comes with a way of thinking about how, like, what you keep on the inside and what you let out too. There's definitely sort of like mental adjustments you go through for that as well.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess, is that where the inscrutable Asian might come from? Just from living in close proximity and not having the...
Yeah, sort of the emotionless, but that's also kind of some of the, fuck you don't understand us, so I'm not giving anything away to you kind of thing.
Yeah, there is that. I can see that.
But if you look at, I'm a little more familiar with some Japanese literature, but there's this idea of having like your mental space is all of these rooms contained within rooms, and like what you let in and out at certain levels depends, because again, in a lot of sort of Japanese living situations, you might be in your own room, but the partition between each other is just paper. So you have to put up mental barriers along with physical barriers. Yeah.
That makes sense. You know, in all of my studies, in 4 years of undergraduate, we never once really touched on implacable facial expressions of that nations adopt oftentimes. And that is something that would be interesting to discuss or to maybe investigate further at some point with someone.
Well, I think we get kind of a chance to talk about that a little bit when we get a little history on Wang Chao, but we're not there yet. So
yes.
It was kind of interesting. We get outside, and we get sort of the San Francisco 1870s version of that lineup of guys outside of Home Depot.
Yes, where they all show up trying to get a job, and the selection process seemed to be very arbitrary there. There was just kind of like, you look fine, you look like crap, you look fine, you look like crap. But it didn't really, I mean, everybody was stoop-shouldered. Assam is clearly a broken man, and he's shuffling along, but he still manages to get a job hauling coal, of all things. Yeah, put the guy who can barely stand up on the wheelbarrow.
Oh, no, those were cobblestones. He was hauling rocks.
Oh. It just, to me, it just looked like chunks of coal or something. So
yeah, where he was dumping him, I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely rocks. And what little sort of landscaping work I've done in my own personal yards, I was like, yeah, dude, rocks are heavy, especially when you have kind of broken ribs and no opium.
Yeah, when he smashed all to bits, he can barely walk, and well, give him the wheelbarrow, he'll be fine.
So we go from the worst place to sleep to one of the nicer places to sleep in San Francisco.
Yes. And so, well, you set it up. Go ahead.
So for me, it was sort of a little mysterious because it was white. Everything was like super duper white, and they had those iron bedsteads, and the way they were sort of setting it up with like there's bowls and lamps and everything. I'm like, okay, we're in a hospital somewhere, especially with all of like the very whiteness. And we move around enough and we can see.
Then they zero in on the bottle of whiskey on the nightstand, which everything in this place is white except for the whiskey.
Yeah. And then we pull back and we see it's Lee, and he is out cold, and O'Hara is sitting next to him looking possibly as bad as Lee.
Yeah, well, it's clear and I hadn't put two and two together because I'm an idiot, but I hadn't associated the fact, like I was like, why would they beat up his partner to get money out of him? But it was, again, just to show like, we don't care, we're coming for you, you better pay us. And so he's sitting there racked with guilt.
Yeah.
But of course I'm thinking the entire time that he's a good guy, and he's doing it because, like he says, that Lee doesn't have any people there, and so if he does wake up, there's nobody to be there. If he does wake up, and if he doesn't wake up, there'll be nobody to mark his passing, like he says to his wife.
And if he dies, there's nobody to say who he is. Yeah, all of that. And real quick thing before we go on. Super duper props to the costume department. What Lucy O'Hara is wearing to sort of go out or go visiting, super on point for her class in that time and place. It's not going to fit as nicely because it was either probably a hand-me-down or a little bit off the rack, or she just didn't have enough time and fabric to make it as nice. But then that blouse she has underneath, excellent, perfect. Like, I was just like, they did a great job.
All of the women's wardrobe in this was unbelievable. Actually, all of the wardrobe I'm coming to find has a lot of meaning that I had no idea about until I started just like, well, what the hell is that a crinoline dress? I'm just like Googling shit, trying to figure out what the hell's going on. They put so much into this. It's just, every time you think that you've like peeled back all the layers of the onion, then there's 6 more layers of cool shit that they just piled into this for no reason.
And even the hairstyles the women are wearing when they're being practical, that sort of like hat looking bun that they've got on the top of their head, like that is perfectly on point for this time and place.
And they've adopted like the, did you watch Vikings at all?
A little bit. Yeah.
I was all big on Lagertha's battle hair. Like, if you knew she was going to go to battle when all of a sudden her hair was just like up in badass braids and like her hair looked like it wanted to fight, and you're like, oh, somebody's going to get it.
Yeah.
And they have that in this too. Like, toy, all of a sudden when you see her hair a certain way, you're like, oh, somebody's about to get stabbed in the neck. But
you can't have your hair in your face when it's time to go kill someone. That's a precision job.
That is true. I mean, unless you're using it to distract somebody.
That's true. But I was having a lot of fun with O'Hara trying to balance out all of his different kinds of guilt. He almost feels comfortable in misery.
It's all well. It's like he's like a walking country song. You can kind of see how like Irish folk music gave us country music because of O'Hara. Yeah. He's always drunk. He's always gambling. His wife's always leaving him, and it's always everybody else's fault.
And 100% shout out to Lucy O'Hara talking about like figuring out how long of a day this poor woman has. She got up like at the crack of dawn, whatever, got some breakfast together, came and gave it to Bill at the hospital. And now she has to like walk all the way back across town and wake her kids up and give them breakfast.
Well, put herself together and like got herself looking all the better than we've ever seen this woman looking. And so she's got her Sunday best on or whatever. And then she goes out to give her husband breakfast. And now she's got to go back and tend to the 13,000 kids.
Yeah, so she has her going out visiting Armor On. But it is nothing compared to how Mai Ling dresses when she's dressed in armor.
Oh, yeah. The Mai Ling's costuming, I wasn't even able to articulate the correct words in order to Google it. So I don't know if you can shed any light onto what the names of any of these outfits are. But they're just fantastic. Every single bit of cloth that a woman wore in this episode was unbelievable.
So what she's wearing right now, I don't think that outfit technically ever existed for a woman. But again, don't care because they're using this gorgeous, thick silk brocade. And then once again, the styling, the yoke, the top part of it that goes across her chest and over her shoulders.
Okay, that's what I didn't know what it was called, but it's like kind of ribbed and stuff. And like, I had so it's called a yoke. All right,
well,
that's dope.
I mean, you think about like a yoke that oxen wear, like that's just sort of talking about like the part of the dress it is. And so the part of a shirt or a dress that goes over your shoulders and over your chest and back, that sort of the poncho part kind of, that would be called a yoke. But the way that it's all squared up.
No, I get it. Like that's what they call it in bodybuilding too, this is the yoke.
Right. And so, yeah, the way that it's all like squared up and stiff and sort of, again, has that look of that sort of Chinese armor that you always see the Chinese generals and paintings in. They've given her that shape again. And oh my God, she and Father June are both so pissed.
Oh yeah. Well, he's showing it. She's keeping it all real tightly. I mean, you can hear her words are very clipped, but she's keeping it all in where he's losing his cool. It's like you can see where young June gets it. It's just like Father June is just a little out of gas. He doesn't have as much steam. He's got to spend it in it where he has to. But yeah. And I loved that when she's saying that, we're going to get this extra territory and he just says, that wasn't my understanding. And then just slams his hand down with the stamp like, I don't give a shit what you want, lady. This is as much as you're getting. The end. And she's like, that's fine. I'm going to kill you later. That's what's happening in their eyes the whole time. Her eyes are just going, I'm going to kill this man. I can't wait to kill this man. This man's just giving me more reasons to kill him with every word.
And I love the way that they sort of set up like the utter formality of this. There's this detailed map of how they're going to divide up the territory, and then they each put their chop down with the special red ink and agree like, hey, all right, fine. We are technically agreeing to this in this moment. And you can see both of them are like, but just you wait.
And I think the map was really significant because I think this is really the time when maps are becoming a thing. Like people are actually looking at maps for the first time. I mean, there were maps, but they weren't. The 19th century seems to be when maps started to become accurate and important.
Well, the Chinese had good maps for a lot longer. I mean, having compasses before everyone else will help out with that. And then also
and GPS. They had for anybody who doesn't know, the Chinese developed a mechanical GPS like thousands of years ago, 2,000 years ago, and it was basically a horse-drawn cart that would always orient. It had a hand that would point to home.
It's the southern pointing chariot.
Yes.
Okay, I'd heard of that.
And that was super cool. Yeah, and so it had, that's where the first differential gearing system came in, so that they could, so that the hand would always point based on, how the cart turned and stuff like that. The hand would point to Beijing or wherever they needed to go back to.
Wow. Hot damn. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was really, really useful for like people who are traveling on the Silk Road and things like that.
Wow. Okay, so then, that's sort of the opening. We've established all the business in Chinatown, and we move over to the Irish Quarter, and these just sort of regular looking black dudes come into an Irish bar and say, "Hey man, just want a drink."
And this is an amazing scene because it shows how noble Leary is, but at the same time, it's like he's almost noble against his own will.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that guy Mac who starts out with, like he had that like real silky, what I've come to see as like this psychotic politeness that always like makes my stomach clench whenever I run across that. Fortunately, I haven't run across that much in real life, but every time I do in a movie or in real life, I'm like, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God.
Oh yeah, the real clenched asshole, fake Southern hospitality thing. It's very, yeah.
Well, you can sort of like they're using these like nice words, but they have sort of like this slimy undertone underneath, and you they're just like being this way so they can get closer to you and hurt you. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and as he's saying, we would appreciate it if you would kindly depart our establishment at your earliest convenience, as three guys, greasy men behind them with brass knuckles and clubs stand up. It's like,
yeah,
I don't think that. He's just being polite to make the threat more threatening.
Right, yeah. Ugh. And then Leary just, boom, burst through the back room door, and he's like, "You asshole, Mac, I'm trying to have a peaceful establishment here."
Yeah, and so he comes out and he's just like, yeah, and these people their people didn't want to come here, and they don't want to be here, but they're stuck here. And this is like, they don't even have to pay for their drinks. And then the people are like, "Oh yeah, thank you very much." And he just looks at them and he's like, "Don't thank me. Drink your drink and get the fuck out of here. It's no better than to come in here." And it's like, Jesus, this man. Whew.
Yeah. He just wants to keep things like even and steady, and having a brawl in here isn't going to help him. That's going to make a bigger mess. But on the other hand, he's like, "Look, dudes, spread the word that you don't come in here." And, I think Leary also understands that the message is going to get spread better if he does them this solid, but is also like, "Look, I held my boys back this time, but what if I'm not here? You don't want this.
Yes, there
Nobody
is that
wants
implied
this."
threat that I hadn't even picked up upon.
But it really comes down to, Mac, you're never going to get in anywhere in this world if the first thing you do is try to, go bash everybody's head in.
Yeah. And also, don't send money back out the door.
Yeah.
There's also an element of that. There was a big element of that, I think. It's like, these people are paying customers. What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, and you could just see the bartender, like, he was perfectly happy to sell him a couple of shots if they weren't going to give him any trouble. And you could just see him standing there, like, holding a bottle and a shot glass going, "Yeah, what do I do?
Yeah, boss, I don't know what to do.
What do I do? What do I do?"
Thank you for showing up, boss. Yeah. I don't want to have to think my own thoughts.
No, he's like, "I just want to keep my bartender job. It's a pretty sweet gig. Jesus."
I make tips.
Right. And so now that Leary's all spun up, he goes to visit Mercer.
Yes. And he is... this man, like, just the way he walks, like when they show him silhouetted as he's walking into the factory is amazing. He looks exactly like the Fighting Irish mascot, with his arms out to the side. And he's just like, he's about to kick the shit out of somebody.
Oh yeah.
And then he walks into Mercer's office, just throws open the door and goes, "Mercer!" And then Penny is just killing it in that dress.
Yes.
That dress, and that's where I looked up crinoline, because I was like, I need to understand, like, what's going on with this dress, because is that accurate? Like, and it looked pretty accurate, but I wasn't sure, so I figured I just wanted to be prepared.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of it that was accurate. The embroidery, I mean, she is dressing in silk, so much silk. I don't know.
So the dress is it's a cream and lavender dress.
Yes, there's your purple.
That is important because lavender had just been into artificial purple had just been invented in 1856, and I realized that when I was making notes that the dude who invented it, William Henry Perkin, was only 18. He democratized fashion at the age of 18 accidentally while trying to cure malaria.
Yeah, he was just, you know, who knows how close he was to curing malaria, but he was definitely one of those teenagers who had access to a lab and a chemistry set and was just fucking around because he didn't have a phone to play games on.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I thought that was cool as shit. And when I saw her dressed, I was like, ooh, lavender. Then I was like, I wonder how many other colors were available at the time, because that lavender was that was the one that opened the door to making artificial dyes and like making artificial colors cheap so that people could wear any color they wanted. And go ahead.
Real quick, the reason, a little context, the reason artificial purple is such a big deal, up until then, purple was expensive as fuck, because basically the only two places you could get it were from those weird Mediterranean snails in Europe, and then you were telling me the root of a Japanese orchid in Japan.
Yep.
Like, purple was hard to get.
Yes.
And that's why everybody went apeshit over artificial purple.
Yep. And it was the color of royalty. Like you were saying, it was so expensive. It was really something that only royals could wear. But now even like minor potentates inside of their inside of a tiny outpost town in like San Francisco, they can afford to buy their wives and purple, and they can be kind of royalty. They are the mini royalty that they were kind of aspiring to be. I think that kind of allowed the aristocratic class to kind of grasp that like royal. Don't you think like that they kind of were able to get the trappings of royalty that they through money that they weren't able to get through buying their like a title or something?
Some of it, but of course they got screwed pretty quickly, because just the second the sort of the upper crust were able to get their hands on a lot more purple, it also became affordable to the middle class, and then the middle class wore purple and lavender and peach and just sort of like every version of that all over the damn place.
Yeah, and I read that it was like if they couldn't afford to buy a purple dress, they would just buy ribbon or something like that, and then do accent pieces, which is kind of cool. They were just putting a little flair, kind of like the little whatever the hell you put those things people put on their Crocs.
Yeah, exactly.
Like back then, they just would have all been lavender.
Yeah, little ribbons and bows and everything. And so, so she's wearing this something that's a version of something called a Spencer jacket, which is just like this huge, complicated sleeves, bustle, super hard to move around in jacket, and then it's over this dress.
Her bustle is huge, and for anybody who doesn't know, this is the BBL of the 19th century.
Yes.
So like. She's wearing a corset, this tight-ass corset underneath her top. And what was it called again? Her jacket?
Well, it's a version of a Spencer jacket. It's not important.
And then, so she's got that on. And then she's got this thing called how many coats? She's got petticoats on. So she's got like multiple petticoats and then like a cage called a crinoline that keeps her skirts out.
She probably wouldn't have, well... She might have had a crinoline. She's getting into smaller skirts. When you think of like the big poofy skirts that are hard to get through doors, that's definitely the crinoline she would have.
So she just had a bustle then.
Yeah, she had a bustle and a couple of petticoats on under there.
Which is a big fake ass that's strapped onto their ass. Yes. It's made of like horsehair. It's basically a horsehair pillow strapped to their ass for real, to give them like a Beyonce booty in this dress.
Exactly. And then the dress she's got on is this big cream thing, and it's got... it's embroidered with this leaf pattern. It again.
Oh, and she had your pearls on. I noticed them this time. I started noticing the pearls. She had this awesome pearl choker. It was gorgeous. It was like, I don't know, maybe 8 layers of 8 rows of pearls with a big like brooch in the middle.
Yeah. No, it's 3 layers, and it's got bars with diamonds on it, and then it's got the brooch in the middle. And once you start looking for it, it's a little interesting signal, and I'm going to be very interested in how it continues on as Penny starts to play around with her position in the world. But because her costume by the end she is her costume is like she's doing the battle hair, and I can't wait. But Leary comes in, he's like, "Get the little woman out of here. I'm here to yell at you, Mercer."
Yeah, and she's ready to fight Leary, it looks like. Yeah. She's ready to fight everybody, because right when Leary's walking in, she's like, "Dad, look, you suck at business. So I'm going to help you fix this shit, but you're going to have to call these people and do what I tell you." And he's like, "I'm not going to do a damn thing you say. You're a woman." And then Leary comes in, and scares the shit out of him, and she has to take her leave. But that's when I started taking pictures of the dress for my wife, and I was like, you got to explain to me what these things are that I'm looking at.
Yeah, Larry's, even before he actually said it, I had written in my notes, I made promises and you made me promises. And then he actually said the line, I'm like, okay, his whole body was saying that even before those words came out of his mouth, and it was awesome. And he is like, I shook your fucking hand, and he's implying, and I am willing to rip your hand clean off.
Yeah. If you make me break this promise, I'm going to break your fucking bones, is what he was saying. And it was brutal the way he said it. I just, like you said, like his whole body, like, I made promises based on your promise. And it's like, all right, well, this man takes promises real seriously. Maybe we should all rethink how we approach promises with this O'Leary.
Oh, yeah. So, here's Leary standing up for his men. Meanwhile, we get back to Assam in his hot bunking situation, and we get to learn that healthcare on the job and having zero is a long-standing American tradition.
Yeah, I mean, that is one thing that Amazon does right. Like, if you get injured there, they will get you patched right up. They do not want any problems. You come in with a cough, you're going to see a doctor by the end of the day.
Yeah, that's pretty...
So, but not in this place. This man cut his leg 3 days ago, and now he is dying of an infection.
Have you mentioned you can die of an infection in the 19th century?
I think I might have mentioned it. I don't know if I mentioned the fact that they thought that your wound running with pus was a natural part of the healing process that happened every time you got injured, which I would just like to point out to anybody who bites their fingernails. We're talking about anytime you rip the nail too far, they expect pus, yellow pus, to come out of your finger. That's fucking crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. That's how often they got infected. And so every time you're like, yeah, you could just die of a splinter. I'm like, yeah, you could die of a splinter.
Yeah. And Lee's lucky he didn't die just going to a hospital.
That's
Jesus.
True.
I mean, they still weren't doing antiseptic. Lister was trying his very best at this point with carbolic acid, just spraying it all over the place, trying to figure out how to get people to get on his side. But it was tough going, and that was happening in Scotland, which is a really far away from San Francisco in 1877.
Well, that was one of the things about that hospital that I was looking at. I'm like, so clearly this is like the rich people hospital that was converted out of somebody's nice house or something.
I think this was a fanciful notion of a hospital because
yeah,
he would have been in a back room of somebody's house, sweating his ass off. I mean, I literally just read about James A. Garfield, or I watched a show about James A. Garfield dying, and so he got shot, and then they dug around in his wound, and his infection from his doctors is what killed him.
Reading about that is just brutal. Whoa.
But they invented the first air conditioning system to try to keep him alive because it was in the middle of a heat storm, like a heat wave, so they put a bunch of ice in front of a fan and tried to keep him cool with that, but he died anyway. And they couldn't keep James A. Garfield alive at the exact same time. So this man is dead. He's a dead man walking, but Assam's still going to care for him anyway.
Yeah. They were going through 400 pounds of ice a day with Garfield.
Were they really? That's a lot of ice. It must have been hot as fuck. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
Although,
maybe that was how much they were using to keep his body cold so they could transport it back for a good burial. But the 400 pounds of ice a day, I remember from reading about that. Just, well.
Imagine if they had melted 1 pound of that ice and then boiled it and then had those doctors wash their hands with it and their instruments before they started, using the knife that they got to dig the other knife that they got stuck in his wound out. And God.
But if you use the hot water, it's going to mess up the humors. It's like
even for doctors in that era, they were trash. Yeah. Get the leeches.
But yeah, so O'Hara realizes he needs a foil. We're back in the hospital. And when you're saying it was a fanciful notion of a hospital, the one thing I wanted to point out is the fact that they had the crown moldings around the edge of the room, and then they had the empty frames, all of this wall decor. A real hospital never would have had that, because one thing they were doing is the nurses would typically wash things down with vinegar. Before they figured out the Listerine stuff, there was...
Oh. That is
a lot of women just knew from working in dairies and breweries and stuff that like, hey, these people are sick. Maybe we should also keep this clean. So a lot of the sanitary notions actually came from the women working in nursing in hospitals.
And the Romans actually knew all about antiseptic processes and using vinegar for it. It's just that when Galen's works were copied by different people, there was so much for them to copy. They didn't copy all of it into their little Cliff's Notes on Galen, who was the greatest Roman physiologist and physician.
He was Greek, actually.
Oh, was he really? Galen was... Well, that makes more sense than he knew what the hell he was doing because he had the...
Yeah, but the Romans did copy him. And, I mean, if you are having to copy down stuff on wax tablets and with terrible writing instruments, are you going to write down the boring part about vinegar that everybody knows already? Or are you going to...
everybody knows to clean a wound with vinegar. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, so you don't have to, write that into the documentation. But then, of course, you have, everybody's literacy falling apart and all of this parchment.
And when all the doctors died in the first year of the Black Plague.
Oh, that.
every single person who knew about vinegar dropped dead on the same day. You're like, oh, well, what was the thing about vinegar again? Probably nothing.
I mean, it's sort of like now. Nobody wants to be known for their excellent preventative measures because it's not sexy and you can't get on the cover of the magazine. You want to be the hero who stops the disaster. We're still the same way. Humans, we're just going to be like that.
Up until recently, though, the Chinese did pay their doctor to keep them healthy as opposed to, when they got sick, your doctor just fixed you.
Yeah, there's certain...
But you paid him to keep you healthy.
Yeah, definitely a certain amount of that. Okay, so we're in the hospital, and O'Hara knows he needs a foil.
We're in the fantasy hospital.
Right, and, he knows he can't be a solo act, so he's basically yelling at Lee, "Wake up! I can't be by myself.
Wake the fuck up."
But just because...
You're being a bad damn cop. You're late for work. Get up.
Yeah. Just because he knows he can't be a solo act isn't going to stop him from just going off half-cocked. And so he goes into the Feng Hai gambling house.
Ooh, and I thought he was going to take it to him because he went in there on a mission and he's slapping people around. And then all of a sudden the guy who took out Lee just embarrasses him, snatches his gun from him, shoots one of his own guys that Bill's using as a human shield just to prove I don't care about anything, and then tells Bill what we already knew. He's going to be taking the job of the bill collector for the Feng Hai.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those moments where you're like, those stories where somebody overpowers death and then they find out that they have become death themselves. It was 100% that. But when that whole super classic kung fu guy takes away the gun, I'm like, look, we already know, don't wear a weapon to a bolo fight, even if bolo's gone. And if you're going to pull a gun on anybody who's even mildly competent in kung fu, don't do it within arm's reach because you're going to look like a goddamn idiot.
Yeah. Absolutely not. Yeah. You're holding it in front of his hands. He can just snatch it at any time.
And he's just lucky that trigger guard area was so big and nice and rounded off because, Feng Hai guy would have been perfectly happy to yank his finger right off.
This is the longest this man's been sober in ages. So, not all of his decision-making's on point. He's going to make decisions great half the time. Another half's going to be trash, and this is one of those instances.
So, yeah, O'Hara realizes that, killing death got him nowhere except a new job.
No, this is just like Final Destination. They think they got away, and then at the end, they start seeing the death coming for him again. Like, damn it all to hell. The reflection of the Grim Reaper in the truck that's about to run you over.
And speaking of returning, Penny comes back to the bar, but this time to see Buckley.
Oh, yes, because she is ready to fight everyone. And also, everybody has dispensed with any notion that the mayor is the mayor and they're just going to Buckley now. Let's not talk to the idiot anymore. He's out banging some weird prostitute anyway, so let's just do the business.
Yeah, that was a little interesting interlude where Buckley's like, hey, yeah, I even encouraged him to marry you so it would curb some of his more unsavory impulses. And I was like, all right.
Oh, yes.
All right. This is a thing that women were fucking living with all during, the 18th and 19th century. They got no information on sex. They were married off super young to all of these guys who were angry and bitter and had all of these desires. that these girls had no idea about. And because of the way marriage structure was working at that point, you got separated from your mom and your sisters and your crazy aunties. You couldn't come back to him and say, is this normal? Like, nobody had any of these resources, and these guys were also going into these poor, uncertain virgins like, God, you don't know anything, and I'm not going to teach you anything. I'm just going to be mad about it.
Yeah, and it's tough to, speaking as a guy, it's really hard for guys to have any kind of understanding of what this would be like, because even when I was 6, I would just walk around and, I grew up in an upper middle class with a kind of an aristocratic air, and I would just boss people around. From 6, I was just like, you there, you have a job, do it. But women, if you want an idea, think, because I just watched a documentary about gypsy culture, and I'm not using that as a slur. I'm using it because that's what the documentary was called.
Right, that's just the way it was titled.
Good God, I saw a lot of people beating up the Roma in Europe, like, without any apparent provocation, and I didn't know why, and now I know why. Women are, I think back in that day, were basically like the Roma women are now, basically kept in the house. You're not supposed to leave the house. You're not supposed to talk to men unless you're related to them or something like that. And then the men are constantly like, they're being trash and then demanding excellence out of this woman who they won't even get up across the table to pick up their own salt. They will say, you go get the salt and bring it to me. And that's what the woman does. And you live at the behest of a man, and you just are his in-house slave, essentially. Is that more or less accurate?
And that's super, there's a lot of accuracy to that. The one thing the Roma women have, that Penny doesn't, is at least they have other women around them. And that's kind of the thing that's going on in sort of these upper class societies, is these women are being completely isolated.
All right. Okay.
So both sucks. It just sucks differently.
All right. So she has slightly more freedom, I guess, because she could ostensibly stab a man with a hat pin if she had to on the street, whereas I don't think a gypsy woman would survive that. But but no community. So
and again, you know,
the opportunity to be more isolated and violent, and that's about it.
Right. Yeah, and Penny, again, she has no friends, and I think they're doing a really good job of showing some pretty typical isolation that a woman of her time and place and class would be suffering. Like, at least Lucy O'Hara probably has neighbors and stuff that she can talk to.
Yeah, because as a lower class person, they didn't have the same, I guess, gender divisions that they did in the upper class, because they can't afford to.
Well, and also her house is much closer to her neighbors' houses, whereas each of these people living on Nob Hill or wherever in San Francisco, they each have their own little mini estate, and just going outside is this whole ordeal. You have to go through this whole ceremony to go visit somebody next door.
Like living in a gated community now.
On point, yeah.
Except now in certain states, you have the added bonus of being shot if you step on your neighbor's property.
We need to get back to there being penalties.
Which you couldn't do back then. It was definitely illegal back then to shoot people for looking at you funny or stepping on your property.
Yeah, we need to get back to actual penalties for people being complete fucking dumbasses with guns, because at this point everybody thinks there's no penalties. So sure, you drive too close to me, you get too close to my lawn, people are starting to think there's no downside to shooting first and asking questions later.
We've gotten a really weird relationship with the concept of justice and freedom now, where we think that justice is it's so retributive and psychotic. So I was reading the Manson woman who just got out of jail, and people are saying she should stay in jail forever, and it's she was a teenager, and she's not going to kill anybody ever again.
That was the woman saying. She's she'll kill again. I'm she's 78, and she's been eating prison food for decades.
If she was going to kill again, she would have done it in prison. That's what people who are going to kill again do. They kill people again in prison. It's a good place to kill people. It's an easy place to kill people. And so, but like, anyway, we're way off topic, but my God, people just freak out. Like, the word justice doesn't even have any meaning to anybody anymore. All it means is like the most psychotic retribution that you could ever have. Like, a mosquito stung me, so I'm going to nuke this town.
Yeah.
Kind of, that's where people are now. There's no, it's not even an eye for an eye. It's like an eye for, I'm going to kill everybody you ever met.
Yeah. So we get back to Buckley and Penny, and they're both trying to like out tough each other, and they're both trying to say, hey, I can really screw you over. Penny, I think her back is a lot more stiff, whereas Buckley is like, I am so used to fucking over everybody who even comes close to me. So, you know, I think he went in with a softer hit at Penny, and Penny just like bats it away. And so he has to come back at her harder.
Yeah, his comment was rough. Where it was, do you have the exact quote? It was something along the lines of, if he had to choose between me and you, she was like, well, we'll see who he chooses between me and you. And he's like, he's off banging some horse. So I think we already know what he's going to
Yeah, because he says, I only serve at the mayor's pleasure. And Penny's like, yeah, me too. And if you really put it to a test, who is he going to choose? And,
there you go.
yeah.
Yep.
And
his clapback was brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just a counterpunch, the likes of which I've never seen in an actual conversation. It was
and that's actually what got me all really spun up, because he's like, well, I got him to marry you, and I already knew he was a sicko. And I was like, look, Buckley, I'm coming for you.
He's one of the only TV characters I've ever yelled at the TV about. Every time he comes on, I'm just like, damn you, you're a piece of shit.
But I also think Buckley kind of realized, like, you could see he sort of had this like little flinch where he's like, uh-oh, Penny is tougher than I thought she was going to be. So I have to recalculate. I have to go in harder with her.
Well, and he even says after that, he has his little remark like, you brought that on yourself. It was something like, I don't take kindly to being threatened or something.
Yeah.
I don't react well to being threatened or something like that. It was real casual, but it was just like, you made me do that. I was trying to be nice. Right.
Very much you made me do that. Okay. So we're back in Asam's terrible, terrible living situation. And this poor Chinese dude with the leg cut, you know, he's not looking good.
No. Well, he's dead now, right? He has died.
No, not quite. He has that thing where he says the ghost of 1,000 coolies will haunt this country. And it It brought me back
and I was like, only 1,000? Jesus.
Right.
This man has really underestimated his number.
Hey, round numbers are great for speeches. But I was thinking back to that 1970s like horror movie trope. You know, this terrible thing is happening in this house because it's on an Indian burial ground. And then in the early 2000s, there was sort of this dark humor joke that all of these things that are happening to the U.S., you know, speaking of built on on an Indian burial ground, that's the whole damn country. And so I was thinking, you know, it might be a good idea not to discount the angry ghosts of all the Chinese workers as well, because angry ghosts will mess up your shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess if you believe in ghosts.
How many angry ghosts can you create before you have to start believing in them? I mean, O'Hara just takes one if it's ugly enough.
Well, yeah, I guess. I don't know. Didn't we already have a very atheist? Yeah, Bill O'Hara would just, or no, it's Lee. Lee would step in right now and say ghosts don't exist.
Oh, 100%. He's very scientific.
Yes.
But Buckley is not done pissing off women. So he and Mai Ling get to meeting in their carriage. Like, they haven't done that in a while. So it was kind of nice to see Buckley and Mai Ling, like, whatever they're up to, it's still on. It's still a thing. But I'm like, dude, do you realize how many people you're making mad at you at the same time right now?
Yeah. But he doesn't care. He's got, I mean, and then he goes up against Leary, or like, he's against everybody, and he has no fear. And it's, well, I mean, we see he does have fear, but it's just like, this man doesn't care. I guess he just hates everybody so much that he's like, it's me against the world, and that's how I'm doing it. It's a crazy way to go through life, but
when he was going up against Leary and the way he was talking to him, I'm like, what the fuck was Buckley's thing in the war? Like, he must have gotten down to some dark shit.
Yeah, when he's like, when he turns into Rorschach and he's like, you've never met anybody like me. Yeah. It's like, I think Leary is probably beating the shit out of many men like you. And because Leary just like smirks and he's like, maybe not. Why don't we see who you are? I'm going to beat you around for a little while and we'll find out.
Yeah, well yeah.
I'm going to beat on this piñata and see what kind of candy pops out of it.
Yeah. So we're back to Assam and he's being too good for this shit with Chow. And, Chow's like, hey, you don't have to be here. Why are you being such a doofus?
And he gives then we get Chow's backstory a little bit, and it is badass.
That comes
Chow has seen some shit.
Yeah, I think that comes just a little bit later.
Does it? Oh, okay, I jumped ahead.
Yeah, because we get to have Lee wakes up. Ta-da!
Oh, yes, that's right.
And the first thing I laughed at is Lee the nurses have been shaving you. Because if he'd been out for a week...
Yeah, in his fantasy hotel hospital.
Right.
By the way, hospitals at this time were on the edge of town because that is where it was right before you got to the cemetery because you went to the hospital and died there.
Pretty much.
And so they just made it easy to get to you to the cemetery. So to say this is fanciful is, I mean, you can hardly imagine Dr. Evil from House of a Thousand Corpses. Now you're in 19th century doctordom. It's filthy. There's probably a lot of screaming. It smells like corpses. Like the whole place smells like corpse. That was called hospital stink back then. Doctors all reeked of quote unquote hospital stink,
yes,
which was just the smell of corpses. I don't even know what corpses smell like. I mean, I have been around roadkill, but so they just smelled like roadkill. And that's where Lee wakes up. He wakes up smelling roadkill, and then his totally hetero life partner, Bill, is there to stare longingly in his eyes when he wakes up.
Yeah, and then that's when everything, like, that's going on, and Bill asks him, hey, what do you remember? And Lee, he got whacked in the head a couple of times, so he doesn't remember the fight, probably.
And then bashed his head on the cobblestones. Yeah. It's a miracle he's alive.
Yeah. So O'Hara's like, all right, we got to do some revenge here. And so they just go out and they just start arresting everybody. Hopway, Longzi, Hung Fai, they don't care. Random Chinese dudes.
They're not simply arresting them. No. They are beating the trash out of them.
That's true. And pitching them in the back of the paddy wagon all together with all their broken bones and broken faces.
And I learned over the weekend, and I can't pronounce any Gaelic word, nor am I even going to try to reproduce the word because there was too many letters in it. But there is an actual martial art from Ireland that was really, really popular in the 19th century that was all about beating people with clubs and shillelaghs. And so everybody carried a walking stick like the Fong Hai's original guy did. And there was an actual martial art that started with a B. It was called like Bite to React or something like that. But it was
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it starts with BAIT, and then there's a lot of letters after that.
And it sort of got weirdly watered down. And so you see like ladies umbrella fighting and men's cane fighting in British literature.
Oh, yeah. Yep. There was a style called Bartitsu that was invented by a guy named William Barton Wright in Britain in the late 1800s that made that really popular. Yeah.
And so they definitely like talk about the mysterious arts of the East, but they've also pointed out that there was some exposure to this kind of Irish stick fighting that people were doing as well.
The shillelagh foo.
Fair enough. So they go out, they arrest everybody. Young June comes down to the work yard and is like, hey, Assam, I'm here to save your ass. And Assam's like, yeah, I'm too good for that.
I'm too good for that, and you are mean to me. And then Young June goes, but there were rules, and I hated those rules, and I'm here to fix it. And Assam's like, I don't care. You're an ass. Screw you guys, and gone home. And then he leaves.
It was a couple of 22-year-old guys. Like, I have more pride than you. No, I have more pride than you. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I learned the name of those suits. So the suits that the Hopway are wearing, they are called Mandarin collar suits. So, should you, like I, wish to purchase one, that is what you're looking for. Mandarin collar suits.
Yes. And that's just, it just has the single kind of ribbon piece around the top, as opposed to what's called a shawl collar, where you have the corners of the collar like flip out.
Ah, all right. So I guess that's what a regular jacket collar is called, a shawl collar.
Yeah, and then there's different, is it a notched collar? And so that's when you've got like the collar on top, and then there's like a notch in it, and then there's the lapel. Yep. But the basic form of all Western suits, it's some version of a shawl collar. And it's sort of like if you took a blanket and wrapped it around you and then like flipped over the edge of the blanket. That's basically what you're getting.
Or like a cardigan sweater.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
But that's where the shawl word comes from.
Oh, well, that is something I probably should have been taught when I was younger. I feel like somebody in a suit store should have told me what the collar is called.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just called a suit. Like, that's just what you wear.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's called a collar, dipshit. Just put it on.
Yeah. And then, like, the Mandarin collar suit, like, you see the other shirt that Assam and the other coolies are wearing. They just have, like, that single piece of cloth that goes straight.
That is called a Song suit.
Okay.
Because it dates back to the Song dynasty.
Ah, okay. And
yes.
So, yeah, here is
and then
where...
the shirt that goes across that has the sailor style front that Li Yong wears, that is called a je duo.
Okay.
So that's it. Yeah, and it's just part of the traditional Shaolin, Shaolin monk.
Yeah, and
uniform.
It has that same thing where I was talking about. You can make one shirt and it's going to fit a lot of people for a long time, because all you have to do is move the frogs around a little bit instead of having to like put in new seams on the side.
Making it much, much easier for moms to put clothes on many children.
Yeah, and do the adjusting. But anyway, finally, yeah, this is where Wong Chow is laying down some truth, like that useful character in a video game who's explaining to you what you need to know for your quest, goddammit.
He is the NPC who's guiding us along.
Well, because Atoy did that last episode. She gave him kind of his mission. You got to go out and fight for the hopeless. And then Wong Chow is like, hey, dude, you think you've had it hard? You don't know hard. Let me tell you about hard.
Yeah. And so he bought his passage to the United States because his parents were both killed in the Taiping Rebellion, which is that thing where the one guy thought he was Jesus's son or Jesus's brother, and he took over China. And so both his parents were killed in this thing, and he comes to the U.S., but his ship's captain just takes him to Cuba and turns them all into slaves and sells them all. So he's there for 11 years as a slave in Cuba, which means everybody was dying of malaria around him. And somehow this man on no food in the jungle, in uncivilized jungle of any kind. They were just hacking out a plantation in the middle of Cuba. And this man managed to live there for 11 years and then left. Somehow got away. And then he has survivor's guilt a little bit. But I think he doesn't have so much of it because he's like, those people I left behind were slaves and I'm not one. And fuck those people. And
yeah.
And Assam, you're no slave either. Get your shit together.
Get your shit together. And I thought it was really interesting, Wong Chow kind of bringing forward that it wasn't just Africans brought over to the east coast of the U.S. and South America being enslaved, that there was global slavery going on. And you talked about it earlier, but, bringing the Chinese over to Cuba, and think about how long that voyage was. Like, if you took Chinese to Cuba, that means you went under South America.
Yeah, so they go around. What is that, Cape of Good Hope, or is that Cape Horn?
That's Cape Horn. Cape of Good Hope is the African one.
Okay, well, in both of them, you can see Antarctica from South America, and it's incredibly dangerous. That was another document. All I do is watch documentaries all weekend, and so there's like thousands of ships right by the Antarctic stations that are across from Patagonia and in Argentina. There are like the graves of 1,000 ships that are just that have all crashed there because the water is so dangerous. So he makes it around that shit and somehow... And then he went back! He went back by boat because he got away, and it's not like he went overland. There was no way to go overland at that point. I mean, unless he just got on a...
I don't think
unless he swam from Cuba to the wilds of Florida and then rode a donkey all the way to, like, San Francisco. I imagine he got back on a boat and took that stupid-ass trip around Cape Horn again.
Yeah, or... Yeah, because he wouldn't, if he's been in San Francisco for as long as he has, he wouldn't have taken a railroad necessarily, not from Cuba. But he does sort of bring up, and you get the idea, like, hey, you know, there were other people that were enslaved, especially in the Caribbean, from China, from India, not just Africa. Like, it was a hot mess, literally.
Oh, God. It was a really, really exhaustingly hot mess, filled with malaria and dysentery and cholera because of untreated
and yellow
waste
fever.
And yellow
don't
fever.
Forget that.
Oh my God, I do forget about yellow fever because it barely even exists anymore. I mean, I'm sure that they'll bring it back in Florida or Alabama or something like that. But
oh yeah. We'll get there. I mean, I'm banking on cholera first because we're gonna let all of our water treatment go to hell. But
hey, set goals and achieve. That's what they're all about down there.
Aim low and achieve.
Aim low and fail to meet those goals in a spectacular way.
But yeah, Assam is really feeling like right now everybody wants a piece of him. Atoy has this wisdom for him. Wang Chao has this wisdom for him. Young Jun wants him to do something. He's like, fuck, man, can't I just be a miserable coolie all by myself? Leave me alone.
Well, anybody who is kind of doing their own thing, whether it's the Colonel from KFC or Henry Ford, there's a pivotal point in everybody's life where they have that crisis where they've just hit rock bottom and the whole world's against them, and they make that choice. Either I'm just going to go the path everybody else goes, or I'm going to become the fucking maven of chicken in the world, or I'm going to revolutionize the auto industry. Like, this is that point in his life, and he's at that point, and it happens in every book too. Like the hero always has to have his, and this is it. He's in it.
Dark Night of the Soul.
And he's reveling in it. And don't we all? When you're at that point, you're like, I'm so glad to be miserable. I'm going to suck in all this misery and revel in it.
Yes, but he does realize, I did find a dead guy in my bed, so all right, I'll take the job.
Yeah. I do like punching people a lot, and eating is cool.
Eating is nice.
And also, I really like those Mandarin collar suits especially with the pocket square.
Square and the red silk lining.
I want to be a little more dapper with myself, I think.
Yeah. But he hasn't gotten the nice threads quite yet.
No.
But we get to see Penny in some nice threads. And again, I just love
her little Red Riding Hood outfit. Is that where we're?
No. We're not there yet.
Damn it!
But no, she's in her dad's office. She's looking at the account book. She's like, "What the fuck are you spending, Dad?" And Dad is like, "Hey, don't tell me how to do accounting." And she basically says to him, "Look, you made me learn fucking algebra, and I am using fucking algebra, and you are terrible at keeping track of your costs, you idiot."
She goes even better than that, too. She says, "God knows I didn't make the sacrifices I did just to watch you squander this opportunity."
Yes. And then Mercer says to her, "I never asked you to do anything." And oh my God, Penny closes her eyes and takes in a deep breath because she was going to smack him.
Yep. Yes. And this is actually where we had the dress. I jumped way ahead. I was so excited to talk about Penny's clothes.
That's okay. Yeah. Because she was kind of wearing a thing in that first scene, and she was wearing the pearl necklace in that one, and she's wearing the pearl necklace in this one. So anyway, she storms out of there, and we have the Romeo and Juliet balcony moment inside the steel foundry.
Oh, yes. Wait, how is that a Romeo and Juliet moment?
Well, because she's standing up.
Oh, yeah, she sees him. Yes, I have the pictures. I'll send them to you. I have pictures of her walking down the stairs, and I'm like, how is that a How is that a Romeo and Juliet when she sees him with his wheelbarrow?
Yeah, she stops. She arrests on the balcony.
Yes.
And Assam is walking by with his wheelbarrow full of wood charcoal. Again, I was like, woo! Historically on point. But yeah, and he looks up at her, and then they are both like, no, yes, no, yes.
Did this live up to your romance novel expectations?
Again, this is one of those tropes that's totally out there, and they've taken it and they've made it way more fun and way more awesome. And she just comes, she just
better
comes
than
clattering.
any Bratva romance novel you've ever read, huh?
Yeah, so she just comes clattering down the stairs. Hey, wait. And, and she's rushing into like this stinky, ashy, coal-filled everything in this cream silk dress. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the level of her desperation.
Number one, that dress would have been completely destroyed just from walking into that building. Can you imagine what it would look like with the amount of soot that would have been on it when she'd leave?
Oh, yeah, the soot particles would have just gone shwink.
Yeah, I mean, that dress would have been gray within 30 seconds and probably black by the time she left. The poor woman.
Yeah, completely enjoyed that. And yeah, they definitely had their problem created by not talking moment that's essential in every romance novel.
Yeah, well, you know what? That wouldn't have happened in a romance novel because she would have been able to smell him from a half mile away. The man has been living in a boarding house with people who have not but bathed in God knows how long, and now it's summer and he's working in a factory. Imagine what he smelled like.
Oh, well...
But you're like, bring me back to the hospital. I need to get some fresh air.
There you go. Yeah. So they have their moment, and then we move on to Mai Ling's best outfit. This is where she has that like pleated silk yoke over the top.
Oh, that's like, the green one that I was talking about before.
Yeah,
that thing's dope.
And that's one of those things where little old Chinese ladies, like with bleeding fingers and going blind, or like making a million tiny stitches to create that sort of quilted pleating that she's got going on there. Wow,
you really painted a dark picture there. Like that was worse than kids sewing soccer balls in Afghanistan. Now you got little old ladies that are being tortured to death in a sweatshop somewhere.
Well, I mean, that's how you got a lot of these like incredibly complex fabric masterpieces that rich Chinese people were wearing. I mean, you just had people working on them for untold hours. And again, I think there's a little bit of a fantasy element into it, but it still gives this implication of just richness and complexity. And I have the best clothes, so watch out.
Yeah. And, now that you're saying that, when you were talking about the stitching, one of the things that I think in the modern world we don't have any conception of is how much effort goes into the shit that people used back in the day. Like the gold leaf that they were putting on everything, especially in China back then. Gold leaf was made by hand by a guy who was sitting on a piece of wood, and he'd have a wood mallet, and he'd have like little thin pieces of gold that he would just like pound on for 8 hours a day, just pounding over his head with this wooden mallet for like, it sounded like a drum when I watched a documentary, of course, about it. But but we're talking about heavy manual labor for 8 to 10 hours a day. And he would take 2 10-minute breaks in the day.
And then the special leather that they were using to like help spread it out, and then also have something that the very thin pieces of foil wouldn't stick to. I mean, the effort that went into curing the leather correctly so that they could be used in this process. I'm like, every single step was insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we have destroyed the world with plastic, but Jesus, it made life easy for a little while, didn't it?
That and mechanical things. So instead of some guy having to sit there and pound on it, and actually that's something that I'm working on right now, looking into 18th century metal manufacture and how the North and the South got super duper out of whack with each other. Because the South had artificially cheap labor, they weren't doing any innovation in manufacturing. And so the North mechanize the metal manufacturing process so much, they were able to start shipping much cheaper steel and iron to the South and put the Southern iron manufacturers out of business.
Interesting. So it's almost like the exact economic situation that we're having with this show was reflected in real life, and that using artificially cheap labor by like manipulating the labor market is not a good idea, and it actually hurts the economy.
It always does. I mean, everybody.
So anti-labor. Are you saying that anti-labor practices are bad for business? Because I'm pretty sure Ronald Reagan said the other thing.
Ronald Reagan is dead, so there's that. But yes, deciding to repress
Saint
your workers,
Ronnie had some things to say. It trickled down.
But oh right, yeah. But keeping your labor force poor, ignorant, sickly, and unhoused in the long term does things in. But man, those profits that you can get, amazing. Have you seen my new purple outfit?
Yeah, ask any billionaire. Ask any billionaire right now. They can tell you all about those nice profits.
But yeah, so Mai Ling is there in her insane outfit, and the Feng Hai stroll in are like, hey, guess what? We're about to fuck up your shit.
Yeah, and I was expecting her to cut that man's head clean off his body. I was surprised when he was like, yeah, let's go back outside because I want you to see that because she says we're done doing business because you beat up this cop, and that's absolutely the dumbest thing that you could do. So, we're done. And he's like, oh, really? Because I got a whole army outside that says we're not done. And I was surprised that because when he said, let's go outside, I was like, ooh, Lee Young is going to kill this man.
I thought we were going to have another fight. I was like, oh, no. And so I looked up this guy's name is Zing, and he's got
Zing with an X or a Z.
The way it's spelled in all of the cast thingies, it's with a Z. Zing.
Okay.
But and I was like, from an English perspective, like, zing, he's gotcha. Just thinking that to myself. But the smile on this guy, like, he could reassure people. Like, he's just kind of got that face, but then, he could just also turn around and have this, like, cold, steely look in his eye. I don't know. He's
mastered. He's the same kind of fake warm psychopath like we had in the throwaway episode 6.
Yes,
like that guy, where he was overly polite but not creepy about it. Just there was no menace in it. It was like, come on, guys, help me help you. I'm a nice guy. It's really when I get pushed that I have to do these crazy things. So don't push me.
Yeah, he definitely has that scorpion thing, the fable of the scorpion and the frog who like takes the scorpion across the river, and halfway over the scorpion just stings him. And he's like, scorpion's gonna scorpion, man. I don't know what to tell you. It's like Feng Hai is gonna Feng Hai. You can't make deals with these guys because basically all the Feng Hai are out to do is make that white mountain of bones. They pretty much don't want any earthly riches. Fuck that.
They are just the wild card. They are always the wild card. They are going to do what wild cards do, and that is whatever happens to strike their fancy at that time.
Yeah. So we get back to Buckley and Leary, and Buckley, I think after kind of not fighting with these women, he's ready to kind of have it out with Leary. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Leary is here for a reckoning with Buckley.
Ooh, I will say that even though I'm aware in my head that everybody back in that time was handicapped, and so like roughing up a handicapped person, like now it seems so monstrous. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like if I were to grab somebody up out of a wheelchair and throw him up against a fence, like he grabbed that dude and just whipped him against a fence, I would never get out of jail, and rightly so. But like here, it was just like that's what's happening. He's a person. He's talking shit. He's going to get beat up. And I'm like, all right, well, but at first you kind of like, oh, like it's kind of, what are you doing? Like the man's already a wreck.
Yeah, I was kind of laughing because Buckley's basically saying to Leary, look, I look down on your artisanal, handcrafted violence. I'm going for more of an industrial scale misery I can deliver in a couple of removes. You're kind of a punk.
Yeah. I'm not afraid of you because all you can do is beat me up. Like, I
Right.
can ruin the existence of everyone you ever met for eternity.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He is the snake playing the long game.
Yeah. And I was just like, what the fuck was Buckley up to in the Civil War? Because he had to be in like some weirdo dark ops because he is a weird, twisty man.
Yeah. He was like Jeb Stuart's right man or something, a right-hand man or something. He had to have been on, like, I can't imagine he was on the Union side. I feel like that he has Confederate guerrilla written all over him.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's like
yeah.
a double, triple something agent. Anyway, yeah, so Leary, what, does he pop Buckley in the gut? Is that
No,
what he does?
he throws him up against the fence, and then he pulls out his knife and puts it against Buckley's cheek, and that's when Buckley leans in, and he's like, "You never met anybody like me before." Like, he's
Yeah.
trying to channel his Rorschach, and then Leary
Yeah.
just kind of smiles and then moves his knife down to his stomach, and he's like, "Oh, we're just gonna have to see what you're made of. Like,
Yep.
we'll just open you up, see what's on the inside," kind of thing.
Yeah. But when Buckley doubles over and throws up, did Leary kind of give him a shot, or was that just
No, that is a trope in action movies when a person is like playing tough and they're just holding their own with this fearsome character,
okay.
and then afterwards they're just so freaked out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what that was.
See, I missed that trope. I know a lot of other ones, but I didn't know.
Well, see, you're here for the romance novel tropes. That's why we're a team.
Absolutely. But yeah, so Leary, he's got, especially after yelling at Buckley and not getting satisfaction of that, it's time to go get some satisfaction in the steel plant. Let's take out these poor Chinese coolies just showing up for work. That's all they did.
Yeah, and then they start smashing their hands with hammers, which I thought was gnarly until I saw how Toy was going to come back. But
but I mean, it was just so gruesome, and it's like it's always the little people. The wrong people are getting hurt in this situation.
Yeah, and so Leary's men are in there smashing people's hands with hammers, and
Mercer, he's like,
Mercer has a heart attack trying to go get his
police.
gun. Yeah, like he's going to do something. And then he drops dead.
When I saw him like call the police and then like runs and locks his office door and he's like getting out his gun, and all I thought while I was doing that is like, oh geez, man, you're just going to hurt yourself. Oh, that is what you're going to do. Okay.
Yeah. He's just going to fall down and die with the gun in his hand.
Yeah, and so looking at Penny and the way she's been talking to the men around her and the way she was talking to her father, you made me learn algebra and you're not going to let me use it. I'm like, what was Penny's mother like? She must have been like a firecracker in a corset.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that if this guy had lived longer, we would have heard, every backstory would have been, you're so much like your mother.
Yeah. And then finally we get Assam going into the crowd. I'm like, okay, this is where he's going to do something cool.
Yeah, and so this is where Assam turns into Bruce Lee, because he's dressed like Bruce Lee in the Chinese Connection. He is using all the same moves. It's exactly like the fight scene in the Chinese Connection in the Japanese dojo, except this happens to be in a steel plant instead. But it's such an amazingly great fight scene. He has so many Bruce Lee moments. Every pose he strikes is amazing. And then we get Leary staring at him, watching him take out all his men, and we're like, oh my god, it's gonna happen. Oh my god, it's gonna happen. The Leary fight's gonna happen.
But first there's the guy who comes at him with a knife, and Assam takes out 3 guys at the same time. He kicks the knife guy and takes down 2 guys with both of his hands. I was just like, holy shit.
Yeah, he's just, his Bruce Lee's turned up to 11. He's going ham. It's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's Leary, and Leary's like, enough of this shit.
Yeah, and so the whole time, this is one of those where, I don't know about you, but like, I have a tendency to skim when I read, so if I'm really excited about a part, I'll just be like, yeah, blah, 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 there's words. So the second time I read a book, I get an entire subplot I didn't know about. But so while that fight was going on, I'm like, yeah, nobody gives a shit. Leary's watching. That's what we want to see. And then Leary comes down and Superman punches him in the chest, and it's like, oh, it's finally happening. And the two of them go at it for 2 seconds. Leary's in his old school boxing stance, and it's so good. And then they get broken up by the cops.
I know. I was like, here's your fight, Jamie. And it's like, oh, God, police are coming. It's just like in Gangs of New York. The police show up.
Exactly.
It breaks up the cool prize fight, and they scatter.
There are so many amazing, like, I'm so glad we did this right after Gangs of New York, because there's so many, like, kind of things that go together. Like, for instance, when we were talking about how, like, when I was thinking about Wang going from Cuba to San Francisco, I was like, I was like, oh, it's 3 weeks on a steamship, which I know from Gangs of New York.
Yeah, that was definitely sort of the teaser there. It's like, okay, they're gonna fight. Oh, no, they're not.
Oh, and they're so evil. Like, they're evenly matched, but in different ways, because Assam's got his very showy, very, like, movement-based, lots of switch stances. He's all over the place. And then you've got Leary straight ahead. He's blocking shit with the crown of his head, which I love doing. And it's just, like, he's all of America's, like, machismo embodied in one badass man. Like, this is America beating your ass.
Yeah.
That's Leary.
I was laughing when he does do that flying punch in. I'm like, that's not how you punch. I'm like, but that is why Assam is able to get back up after he gets punched in the sternum again.
Everybody does Superman punches now, though. They got so popular in the UFC that, like, people practice them in MMA gyms and all kinds of shit. So it's not...
gotta be grounded. Come on.
You know, those... I don't know that... There was one Superman punch that knocked a guy out where somebody ran up a cage. So he took like 3 steps off the cage and came down off the cage, and Superman punched him. That's the only knockout I could think of from that. But they are fun as shit to watch.
Sure.
Like, they're just trying to get on Sports Center. It's not you're not always trying to win with every shot.
Fair enough. And then we're back to O'Hara, and O'Hara has donned the cloak of Jack Damon, and he is in running collections for the Feng Hai.
And as he's doing the collections, I was like, my God, what an easy thing it is to just put a person who owes you a lot of money in charge of collections. He already knows everything they're going to say. He already knows the beating that they can give and get. He knows every side of it now because he's been on one side and he wants to stay off that side. So he's going to do his job. But
he probably knows most of the guys too.
Yeah. But he can do it kind of ethically because they know he's not going to lean on them too hard because everybody knows everybody. And so he can get the money out of them that he can. And that's what he says. Like, oh, well, if you say you can give me 10, then you got 20, which means give me 15.
Yeah. And I did have a little bit of fun. Once again, you know, the scene setting that they're doing, this guy is probably like a manager or like owns a small store. He's got a nicer house than O'Hara, but not like a rich person's house.
He looks like a bank manager kind of person or something like that. Yeah.
But just the way the way he was dressed and the rooms he's standing in, the way they did that, I was just like, wow, they are doing such a good job of doing a lot of the narration by just setting the scene correctly.
Yeah. Again, there's so much detail in the world that they've created that they don't have to explain everything, because if you do a little research on Wikipedia, you can learn how much they're telling you without saying anything.
Yeah, and the fact that they use quite a few kerosene lamps in this particular episode, which, again, 100% on point. Right after the Civil War, the entire whaling industry in the U.S. fell on its face. And so while people had been using whale oil for a lot of interior lighting, after the Civil War, using coal gas and kerosene was developed around this time. And the fact that San Francisco...
Which works out real well for a number of cities.
Right.
Chicago springs to mind.
Yeah, so like San Francisco had that gas lighting. Like kerosene would have been in the mix. And I was just like, they're killing it. I love it.
They are killing it. But it's just, so you're just like, oh my God, the whole world's a fire hazard.
Yeah, the nice dry boards that house and every other house was made out of.
It is amazing that they just lived with death in the face at all times. And they're just like, yep, that's going to get me. Literally at any second, like, you turn a corner and that's it. Like, everything you ever had was gone. Like, there is no getting it back. There's no talking to a manager. There's no insurance. You are just fucked, and you just have to figure it out.
You just move on. Yep. So, speaking of death around the corner, death in the room, we get to see Ah Toy's new project. She's got lying there training hard with the sword.
And again, I know this is ridiculous, but like she's in there whipping this butterfly sword around with all these beautiful draperies and like, you see all these wall hangings in the background. And you're like, this woman's gonna hack all this stuff to pieces. Like, go outside with that sword, woman. What are you doing?
No, you can't have a woman outside with a weapon.
You can't have your assassin training outside, but still, like, you could find a room that isn't filled with draperies.
It's true. I mean, you sort of think about Li Yong's, dojo or training room or whatever. That seems like a much more sensible place.
Yeah. And then there's stuff you can hack into if you want to. You got some unadorned posts you can chop up if you need to.
There you go. And so now we finally get to Penny's sick red dress.
Oh my God. You describe this dress because I'm sure you can do a better job of it than I can. I just, like, when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is Little Red Riding Hood. But who's doing business for her dead father while mourning him and crying and being like, this man is a pile of shit. I'm going to have to fix this shit before we all starve to death.
Yeah, so the Little Red Riding Hood, like, that's what came to mind for me too. But yeah, she's got, if you think about how Indian women dress, they typically have sort of that long scarf that sort of goes over their shoulders. She's got that kind of wrapped around her head as kind of a hood, and that she brings down.
In a deep, like, blood red, what was that, silk or satin kind of looking thing?
Yeah, so I was like, okay, so this episode and then Ah Toy's necklace as well, I felt like the costume department was doing their part to pay tribute to all the other different peoples who were enslaved at this time. It wasn't just black people, it wasn't just Chinese people. There were a lot of Indian people who were being enslaved globally, particularly by the British, because her outfit is clearly referencing a sari, sort of the Indian traditional dress. And if
S-A-R-I, yeah.
Yeah. And if you see the embroidery on the sleeve, it kind of has that peacock feather eye design to it.
And so it was in black. It was like there's such a, the dress looks so expensive, didn't it?
Oh yeah, that was so much red cochineal dye to get that intense, that bright, like, British military red. But it was on a silk chiffon. So what is
cochineal? Is that a snail?
Cochineal are those little South American bugs that are squished up to make bright red.
Oh, okay. I didn't know we were busy squishing bugs to make red.
Oh yeah, because you could also make
just murdering ladybugs to make a shirt. That seems.
The bugs don't live very long, and they grow on, like, the prickly pear, those like bright pink cactus fruits. That's where they live, and so that's why they have that super bright color. But you could also make this cinnabar red, but you'd also get mercury poisoning for it, and it wasn't so good for dyeing fabric. So squished bugs, definitely better.
What is cinnabar anyway?
Oh, cinnabar is a. Oh God, what is it? It's
is that
something.
A spice?
No. It's an alloy with mercury.
Oh.
Sort of like.
Certainly not a spice.
No, I mean, it sounds like cinnamon, but no, cinnabar is an alloy you make with mercury. It's sort of like you can make a lot of really strong colors with lead, like really bright yellows and really bright greens, because it doesn't corrode. Mercury's the same way. It doesn't corrode, and so it holds these really bright colors. Now I'm going to have to look up cinnabar. Exactly what it is. But yeah, so she's got this really brightly red dyed outfit on. It's got some black, but it also has gold thread in there. And so I was curious when Lady Curzon's peacock dress happened, because this is this really super famous like 10-pound dress made with gold wire thread in the pattern of this peacock outfit. Yeah. And to give the blue-green shimmer of peacock feathers, they actually sewed beetle wings onto it.
Jesus. That's kind of like Cruella, like a reverse Cruella. I don't know if you saw that movie, but where she had the moths eat all the dresses.
And so this is like at the very end of the 19th century, the very beginning of the 20th century, when the British were really like sticking it to the Indian subcontinent.
Wait, how do you clean
just
something that is made with beetle shells? Like, you have to be, like, that's
you have to
certainly
basically dust it.
Okay, yeah, that's not even dry clean. You just have to basically look at it and hope it gets clean.
Yeah, you only wear it to like one party every 20 years when you like remake the dress. I mean, the whole thing was the British were saying, "Hey, look at all that we've done. We've totally taken over India. We have them under our heel." And so she has this dress made by Indian embroiderers, and so when she's talking to English people, it's like, hey, look, we have all these wonderful economic ties to the Indian subcontinent, but all the Indians are seeing is like, you are just taking it to us, because not only it's the peacock dress, it looks like peacocks. The peacock throne had been an important governmental thing in India, and the British had taken away. So she was in a room where something called the Peacock Throne had used to be. So it was kind of the way for the British to come in and say, yeah, our women are wearing your jewels, so suck it.
Oh, I guess that would sting. They weren't quite as misogynistic as, say, the Persians, but yeah, it's not, yeah, that would be pretty vicious. Huh. What a weird way to dig at people, but people...
Yeah, the Victorians to the Indians, they were dicks. There's no other way to say it.
Petty in just like the most apocalyptic way. I mean, that is genuinely apocalyptic pettiness.
Yeah. So anyway, the fact that she had this gold embroidered Indian facing dress style on, I'm like, that was very, very on point for the time and place. And I was a little amazed that she was dressed in this bright blood red, because being in black mourning was like a lifestyle for women at this time. And so her dad has just died and she is not head to toe black. I'm like, what's the hell going on?
Was she even wearing a veil?
No.
Yeah, there was no veil, nothing. It was just, yeah.
So I guess that was her war accounting dress.
And veils were much more important to not just to cover a person's face, but like veils were an important part of fashion until like the 60s, I guess, right?
Right. And I mean, at that time and place, women wearing veils to sort of like go out and ride around town or be in carriages, like there's a practical element to it. You could just get like horseshit dust in your face, and so you'd rather have a veil on to not get it in your mouth.
I can see that. Although I will say that since I started wearing my glasses again, there is a level of like separation that putting something between your eyes and people gives you. That like just the glasses, I give less fucks about what people are thinking about me than I do when I'm wearing my contacts, because there's something separating us. And I think the veil might do that as well. And in a like a horrifically misogynistic world like it was prior to the 1960s, that probably was a nice like barrier. It was a shield in front of their face.
Yeah, the veiling yourself, it cuts both ways. And the number of times you can stick out your tongue and make faces at a guy who can't see your face, at least you have that small satisfaction.
Oh, I was just talking about the black.
Oh, the fashion ones, yeah.
Yeah, the fashion veil. I wasn't talking about like wearing a burqa. I was just I meant like the little John you could see through, and it was just like it just puts a little, I don't know.
Oh yeah,
whatever this wiggling fingers thing I'm doing in front of my face and nobody can see is. I don't know, diaphanous, whatever that is. What is it?
Yeah,
what is that made of?
There also is lace. Something. Yeah, sort of a lace thing in front of your face. There is also something to wearing impractical things to show that you cannot be doing hard labor. Like you can't be a kitchen maid wearing a veil.
That is true. And also something that I learned from Andre Talley is that like if you dress like you're an aristocrat, people will just assume you're an aristocrat, even if, especially when you're in a place that you aren't supposed to be.
Yes.
Like he would go around and people would just think that people think he's an African prince. And he's just a fashion maven, but like he carries himself. He has such comportment, and aristocratic comportment in his dress is such that people just assume that he's supposed to be where he is because he carries himself that way. And I think that there's probably an element of that as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And Penny clearly doesn't give a fuck. And now that she's in her Young June moment where she's able to take over the business too, like now she's in that position of Mai Ling's in and Young June's in where they're just, or Young June's all about to be in, where they're just taking over for they've been waiting to get in there. Put me in, coach, and now this is their time to shine.
Yeah, and so Assam gets the final word that at the end of the season, it's not just Mai Ling, it's not just Atoy, it's not just Penny. Even him, clothes make the man, and he gets to do his Saturday Night Fever, strut down the street in his sweet new suit.
Yep, well, he also says to Atoy, like, all right, here we go. I'm on your team. I'm going to be a hero man, but I'm going to be a hero man in disguise because I'm going to be a hatchet hero man.
Yeah, and this is where he brings a little token of appreciation to Atoy, a couple of the Irish toughs who came in to beat up the coolies at the steel plant, and yeah, that's when she sends them off to be taken out gruesomely.
Yes, well, after she says, so what were they doing? And he said, yeah, they were breaking their hands with hammers. And then she goes and grabs this big... So these hammers, for anybody who's not watching this show, these are not hammers like you're thinking of a claw hammer.
They're like 5-pound sledges.
Yeah, they're like 5-pound sledges, little 5-pound sledges. And so this is what they were breaking people's hands with. And so then you see a guy grab one of these guys by his shirt collar because there's two guys are hogtied. He drags him off and then you just hear him screaming in the background.
I mean, it is stereotypical dragging those guys down into the hole of the demon's den. And they scream like that's where they've gone.
Yep. Ugh. Yep. They're getting that hammer.
So that was a hell of a season finale.
We've got Assam as a freedom fighter. We've got Leary and he are going to fight at the end of season 2, which for a fact. Like, this is the same setup we had with Lee Yong for season 1. So here we go.
We've set up a couple of new conflicts for season 2. Penny is feeling her oats. Mai Ling and Buckley are both really putting themselves on precipices that are, who knows what's going to happen.
Also, there are these very powerful women, 3 very powerful women who are situated oppositionally to each other. So they can't lean on each other for support where you might think that like they're united in their femininity. No, because they have a racial divide, a cultural divide, and different interests. Like they're divided by their interests. You have the egalitarian folk hero whorehouse madam versus the evil dragon crime syndicate queen versus this new up-and-coming, we're not even sure what she's going to be. She's not sure what she's going to be.
Right.
She's been training, but she has no idea what she is. And now we see she's evil Little Red Riding Hood, possibly?
Yeah, I don't know where that's going to go, but I think Buckley's going to be shocked because he was used to pushing Mercer around, and because Mercer only has daughters, I think Penny, as the mayor's wife, can successfully lobby to take over the business. I might be wrong.
Yeah, because she said, I'm not going to let my sister starve. So she's looking out for her sisters.
Yeah, so.
And it's a really nice allegory for the kind of women awakening into their own humanity as a whole in America and in the Western world. Just like being able to move through the world as like a human being.
Right. And the men going, what the hell, man? What are you doing over there?
Yeah. So they have to go, she has to go 3 times as hard to get half the respect. Meanwhile, Mai Ling and Atoy have to go 3 times as hard to get a fifth of the respect. And then even then, like Buckley said, if you travel, that was such a great exchange when he and Mai Ling, and he was saying to Mai Ling, like, you travel half a mile outside of Chinatown and you're nothing. Nobody cares about you. And she was like, yeah, that's a long way, a half mile. I hope you have a safe trip back home. I loved it. It was so vicious. It's like, you're only alive because I allow it, is what she said to him.
Yeah. And this is where Buckley is used to holding all the cards and used to holding all the strings and used to holding all the power. And so he's pissing everybody off at the same time. What the hell, dude?
It's amazing. And so with this cliffhanger, I guess we're going to stop this series. And what are we going to move on to? I'm going to say you're picking it and pick now.
Okay, so we have definitely fulfilled the prize fighters and gangsters. I think it's time to come up number 3 and deal with the circus freaks aspects.
Oh, you're gonna make me do the Barnum, aren't you?
Yeah, well, there's a Barnum TV series out there. You had been talking about Ringling Brothers. There's The Greatest Showman. I mean, look, we're going to have to do a little homework for this one, but we've got a little runway here, so we can sit down, figure out how we want to do this, but I think we have to live up to our full name for the next episode.
All right. I love it. And I will say that I watched a film that falls within our purview and is fantastic, and I'm going to recommend it to you. It is called Surrounded. It stars Letitia Wright, who was in Cop Shop. She was amazing in that. And she plays a freed slave who has, she infiltrated the Buffalo Soldiers as a man because the white people don't look at her, and so nobody notices she's a female, and the black people don't give a shit because they're like, you want to get shot, what the fuck are you doing, this is crazy. And so she's a total badass, and she's out west in our time period and in our region, and her stagecoach gets robbed, and she gets put in these progressively more insanely difficult situations, but the name Surrounded describes her situation because as a woman in the world, she's surrounded by men who don't give a shit about her and are probably going to rape her and just don't even think she's capable at all, no matter how many of them she kills. And then she's black, so she's surrounded again, and it's like every move she has available to her has a million no's in the way of it, and she has to make a choice based on the greatest prospect for success where life is an impossible mission. It's a badass movie.
That sounds like a hell of a show. We might have to... we definitely will have to fold that into this, because the adventure stories of black people in the 18th and 19th century, the more I research, the more I'm discovering they're out there. They're completely ignored. I totally want to see them. So...
yeah, and there's also there's a new movie about the Joseph Boulogne. He was a violin virtuoso who became a semi-successful opera composer, but he was also the fastest man in Europe at the time. He was the best swordsman. He had the best physique of anyone. He was black. He was one of Mozart's primary competition at the time, and he was beloved in Europe. So there's a new movie about him out as well.
Okay, very cool. All right, so we will be back next week with some circus hijinks. I don't know exactly how many episodes or how that's going to unravel, because we're going to have to do some homework, Jamie. Sorry about that.
Circus hijinks. I love homework, if you hadn't noticed.
All right, more documentaries.
I can't stop doing it. It's a compulsion.
Okay. All right, well, we'll see you next time for some circus hijinks.
That we will. Bye.
All right, bye-bye. You can find more of Jamie and how he can make you stronger at plagueofstrength.com. You can learn more about old American food on my other podcast, The History of American Food. We're on Instagram at pcgpodcast, and you can always reach out to us by email at pcgpodcasters@gmail.com. Find more dope beats like this one from royalraven.com.